Roy Rogers is rightfully regarded as a true Hollywood legend. From his dominance of Western cinema to holding a spot at the top of box office charts for over 10 years, his infectious smile and distinctive voice earned him the title of King of the Cowboys. But Rogers' rise to fame wasn't instantaneous. Born in a small Ohio town, he had to claw his way up, singing for spare change during the unforgiving years of the Great Depression. His journey to stardom was as riddled with heartbreak as it was with triumph, and behind the screen, odd decisions by studios nearly derailed his promising career. Keep watching to uncover the astonishing truths behind Roy Rogers' legacy. Roy Rogers didn't come into the world as a cowboy legend. He was born Leonard Franklin Sly on November 5, 1911, in a cramped Cincinnati tenement. His family's living quarters were so tiny that they were eventually swallowed up during the building of Riverfront Stadium. Roy often joked that he was born on second base. His parents, Andrew "Andy" Sly and Mattie Womack Sly, longed for a quieter life. In 1912, Andy and his brother Will built a 12 by 50-foot houseboat using salvaged wood and metal. The Sly family set out on the Ohio River, aiming to settle in Portsmouth. They had just purchased land there, dreaming of a new beginning. But the Great Flood of 1913 rerouted their plans. Literally. The rising waters carried the houseboat directly onto their land, and they simply continued living in it after it came to rest on dry soil. By 1919, the Slys moved again, this time to a farm in Duck Run near Lucasville, Ohio. It was just 12 miles north of Portsmouth. They worked hard to build a 6-room farmhouse, but farming didn't bring in enough income. Andy took on grueling work at a shoe factory in Portsmouth, living apart from his family during the week and returning home each weekend bearing small gifts. One such gift, a horse, sparked Roy's deep and lasting love for horses. Life on the farm lacked glamour. Without a radio, the Slys made their own entertainment. Saturday night square dances became a cherished family tradition, with young Roy leading the charge, singing, strumming his mandolin, and even calling the dances. It was also during these formative years that he perfected his cowboy yodel, which he initially used to call out to his mother across their fields. Roy began high school in McDermott, Ohio, but his education didn't last long. When the family returned to Cincinnati so Andy could take another job at a shoe factory, Roy dropped out during his second year to work alongside his father. He attempted to continue night school, but the demands of factory labor left him exhausted. After being teased for dozing off in class, he abandoned schooling entirely. Then, in 1929, a glimmer of hope appeared. Roy's older sister Mary had settled in sunny Lawndale, California. Tempted by her stories of opportunity, Roy and Andy left their factory jobs, packed up their 1923 Dodge, and drove cross-country to visit her. The visit lasted 4 months before they returned to Ohio, but California had left a mark. Not long after, Roy made the journey back west, this time hitching a ride with Mary's father-in-law. The rest of the family followed in the spring of 1930, moving into a small rental house near Mary's. Roy and Andy found work as gravel truck drivers on a highway construction project, but California wasn't the land of dreams they'd hoped for. In the spring of 1931, the construction company folded, and Roy relocated to Tulare, California, where he picked peaches for Del Monte. He lived in a labor camp, enduring conditions that mirrored the bleakness of the grapes of wrath. The Great Depression had hit California just as hard as Ohio, but everything was about to change. Mary, recognizing her brother's musical talent, urged him to audition for the Midnight Frolic radio show. She even stitched a Western shirt for him to wear. Despite his nerves, Roy performed live on air, playing guitar and yodeling into the KFAC microphones in Inglewood. His performance struck a chord. Just days later, he was invited to join a country music group called the Rocky Mountaineers. He enthusiastically signed on in August 1931. The next month, a Canadian named Bob Nolan answered the band's newspaper ad, which read, "Yodeler wanted, Though his time with the Mountaineers was short-lived, Nolan formed a strong bond with Roy. Their musical chemistry would later prove fateful. Bob was soon replaced by Tim Spencer, rounding out a new lineup for the Mountaineers and setting Roy Rogers on the path to becoming a Western icon. The early 1930s were a whirlwind for Roy Rogers and Tim Spencer. They bounced between groups like the International Cowboys and the O-Bar-O Cowboys, never settling, always chasing the right sound. When Tim stepped away from performing for a while, Roy found a new opportunity with Jack Lefevre and his Texas Outlaws, a radio favorite in Los Angeles. Still, Roy couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. That missing piece arrived in early 1933. Fate brought Roy back together with Bob Nolan and Tim Spencer, and the three formed a new act, the Pioneers Trio. Roy manned the guitar, Bob handled the string bass, and Tim led with his smooth vocals. They spent countless hours perfecting their sound, their voices blending into a rich harmony that felt entirely their own. Roy continued his radio work on the side, but the trio quickly became his real focus. Bob and Tim started writing their own music, their creativity fueling a steady stream of original songs. Then, in 1934, their big break finally came. They welcomed fiddle player Hugh Farr into the group, adding a new layer to their sound. Word of their music began spreading, thanks in part to short but frequent radio appearances. It was a radio announcer who unwittingly gave the group their lasting identity. Feeling that Pioneers Trio sounded outdated, he introduced them on air as the Sons of the Pioneers. The name caught on and stuck. By the summer of 1934, the Sons of the Pioneers were gaining serious momentum. No longer a regional curiosity, they became one of the most talked-about country groups in the West. That same year, Decca Records, a fledgling label, offered them a recording contract. On August 8, 1934, they laid down their first commercial tracks, including a haunting Bob Nolan composition called Tumbling Tumbleweeds. Over the next 2 years, they would record a total of 32 songs for Decca, including the timeless Western ballad, Cool Water. Roy was evolving. Gone was factory worker Leonard Sly. In his place stood a rising star, the singing cowboy who would soon become an icon of the American frontier. His transition to film began in 1935. Always industrious, Roy started in modest roles, sometimes just providing vocals in low-budget westerns. He was still credited under his birth name, Leonard Sly. But all of that changed in 1938 when a pivotal moment arrived. At the time, Gene Autry, the reigning singing cowboy of the silver screen, had asked for a substantial raise. Republic Pictures, not keen on paying more, needed a new face to carry the torch. They launched a search for someone with the full package. Someone who could sing, ride, and win over audiences without demanding a superstar salary. It turned into a kind of talent showdown. Several hopefuls, including Willie Phelps, who had already appeared in early westerns, auditioned for the role. But it was Roy who won the studio over. His warm smile, genuine charm, and everyman appeal gave him the edge. Republic rebranded him with a bold new name, Roy Rogers, a moniker that sounded like it belonged on a saloon marquee. His first starring vehicle, Under Western Stars, hit theaters later that year, and a new cowboy legend was born. Audiences loved his heroic persona and wholesome demeanor. He quickly became a matinee idol. Roy's rise didn't stop there. In 1940, he landed a role in Dark Command, a John Wayne feature that further cemented his star power. In that film, he shared the screen with veteran character actor Gabby Hayes, launching a memorable cinematic partnership. By the late 1930s, Roy Rogers was no longer just a rising star. He was a full-fledged box office phenomenon. While most actors stepped into fictional roles, Roy stood apart by portraying a version of himself on screen. Audiences weren't just watching a character, they were seeing the real deal, a genuine cowboy hero. His down-to-earth charm made him especially beloved by children. From 1939 through 1954, Roy was a fixture on the list of top 10 money-making Western stars year after year. Between 1943 and 1952, he held the coveted #1 spot, solidifying his dominance in the genre. But his appeal wasn't limited to Westerns. In 1945 and 1946, he even cracked the top 10 list of all film stars, proving his broad popularity. As his fame grew, Roy's films became more visually dynamic. While most Westerns were still shot in black and white, his productions burst onto the screen in vivid, true color. Audiences delighted in seeing not only Roy but his famous horse, Trigger, who sometimes had entire storylines of his own. Roy wasn't just a performer, he was a savvy businessman. His contract included ownership of his name, voice, and likeness. This strategic move opened the door to a multimedia empire. Soon there were Roy Rogers toys, books, and merchandise everywhere. His brand became so widespread, it rivaled even Walt Disney's reach. Despite his soaring fame, Roy stayed grounded. He never lost touch with the Sons of the Pioneers, the musical group he helped launch. Though the lineup changed over the years, the group endured, and Roy frequently collaborated with them. Whether on film, radio, or the stage, he proudly stood by them, honoring the bond they had forged in their early days. In 1944, Roy's life took a heartwarming turn when he met singer and actress Dale Evans on a film set. The two fell in love quickly, forming a powerful partnership that extended beyond Hollywood. They became vocal advocates for adoption and children's charities, opening their hearts and home to several adopted children. Their Christian faith was the cornerstone of their life together. As active members of the Hollywood Christian group, they found a community of like-minded believers, which included notable figures like evangelist Billy Graham and actress Jane Russell. Roy and Dale eventually made their home in Apple Valley, California, where they became beloved local figures. Their philanthropic work with disabled and homeless children earned them widespread recognition. Streets, highways, and public buildings were named in their honor, commemorating their commitment to helping others. Roy was also deeply involved in the Masonic community, becoming both a Freemason and a Shriner, roles through which he supported numerous charitable causes. One of the most enduring pieces of their legacy came through music. Dale Evans penned the cheerful tune "Happy Trails," which became the signature sign-off for their widely adored television show. In 1962, the couple launched The Roy Rogers and Dale Evans Show, a mix of Western skits, family-friendly comedy, and musical numbers. Though the show only ran for 3 months due to stiff network competition, Roy remained a frequent presence on television, making guest appearances as himself or as cowboy characters in various programs. Always the entrepreneur, Roy didn't stop with film and TV. He founded a production company in Hollywood, which went on to produce his own series and other projects like Brave Eagle, a Western centered on a peace-seeking Cheyenne chief played by Keith Larson. In 1968, Roy took his brand into the culinary world by licensing his name to the Marriott Corporation. This partnership led to the creation of Roy Rogers Restaurants, proof of his ongoing relevance and appeal. Even in his later years, Roy never strayed far from his roots. In 1970, he returned to his hometown of Leck, Texas, with Dale to headline an intercollegiate rodeo. His final film, Macintosh and TJ, was shot in 1975 on the expansive 6666 Ranch, a fitting location that echoed the spirit of the Wild West he so dearly loved. Roy's influence went far beyond cinema. He embodied traditional values, faith, family, and community, while remaining a true symbol of the cowboy way of life and the American dream. One of the most iconic elements of Roy's image was Trigger, the golden Palomino stallion born in 1932. Originally named Golden Cloud, the horse was rechristened Trigger after Roy took ownership. The two were inseparable both on screen and off. Roy's passion for horses extended beyond his famous steed. He also owned a prized racehorse named Trio, showing his deep love and appreciation for these noble animals. Roy's journey into love began in 1933 when he connected with a kind-hearted young woman named Grace Arlene Wilkins. She had called in to a New Mexico radio station and playfully promised to bake him a pie if he sang for her. He accepted the challenge, and the two quickly fell for each other. Their romance blossomed, leading to marriage in Roswell in 1936. Together, Roy and Grace built a family. They adopted a daughter, Cheryl Darlene, in 1941, and welcomed a biological daughter, Linda Lou, 2 years later. In 1946, Grace gave birth to their son, Roy Rogers Jr., fondly nicknamed Dusty. But just days after Dusty's birth, tragedy struck. Grace died from complications related to childbirth, leaving Roy devastated. He eventually found love again with Dale Evans, an actress he first met in 1944 while working on a film. Their connection was immediate and deepened quickly. Staying true to his cowboy spirit, Roy proposed during a rodeo at Chicago Stadium. They were married on New Year's Eve in 1947, back in Oklahoma, where they had once filmed together. Their new family soon grew. They had a daughter, Robin Elizabeth, and later adopted 4 children, Mimi, Dodie, Debbie, and Sandy. But sorrow returned when Robin, who was born with Down syndrome, passed away just before her 2nd birthday. Despite heartbreak, Roy and Dale's relationship remained strong. In 1955, they moved to a sprawling ranch near Chatsworth, California, where they created a warm and nurturing home. Yet tragedy revisited them in 1964 when their daughter Debbie was killed in a horrific church bus accident. Grieving once again, the couple sought peace and healing by relocating to Apple Valley, California. Roy's interests reached far beyond acting. He was an active Freemason and committed Shriner, regularly participating in lodge activities and charitable work. He also pursued flying, eventually becoming a skilled pilot and proudly flying his own Cessna Bobcat. In politics, Roy held firm conservative views and publicly supported Barry Goldwater in the 1964 presidential election. On July 6, 1998, the world said goodbye to the king of the Cowboys. Roy passed away from congestive heart failure at the age of 86. He was buried at Sunset Hills Memorial Park in Apple Valley. 3 years later, Dale Evans passed away and was laid to rest beside him, their enduring love story continuing beyond life itself. Roy's remarkable legacy was honored with numerous accolades. On February 8, 1960, he received a rare distinction, 3 stars on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, commemorating his contributions to film, television, and radio. Roy Rogers received numerous accolades that reflected his lifelong dedication to the Western genre. He was honored with the prestigious Golden Boot Award not once, but twice, in 1983 and again in 1996, highlighting his enduring impact on Western entertainment. In a touching moment of cultural recognition, Western Native American tribes named him their Outstanding Indian Citizen of the Year in 1967. His achievements were further acknowledged when he was inducted into the Western Performers Hall of Fame, first in 1976 and again in 1995, celebrating both his solo work and his role as a founding member of the legendary Sons of the Pioneers. Even the state of Arkansas paid tribute to him, bestowing the title of Special Arkansas Traveler. One of Roy's most remarkable distinctions came from the Country Music Hall of Fame, which inducted him twice, once as part of his group and again as a solo artist. As of 2022, he remains the only individual to have received that double honor. And in 2001, both Roy and Dale were immortalized together with a Golden Palm Star on the Palm Springs Walk of Stars, cementing their status among Hollywood's most cherished legends. Roy's legacy extended far beyond formal recognition. He left an unmistakable mark on popular culture, inspiring songs like Elton John's Roy Rogers, Lyle Lovett's If I Had a Boat, and Toby Keith's Should Have Been a Cowboy. He even made a cameo in Randy Travis's music video, Heroes and Friends. His influence made its way into film as well. Bruce Willis famously adopted Roy as his alias in Die Hard, while Jack Palance's character in City Slickers crooned Tumbling Tumbleweeds, a song forever tied to Roy's cowboy image. But Roy Rogers was more than a singing cowboy. He was a symbol of the American frontier spirit, a trailblazer whose legend stirred dreams of freedom and wide-open landscapes. Even in retirement, Roy wasn't content to ride off into the sunset. Inspired by a visit to the Will Rogers Museum in 1938, he envisioned a place to honor his and Dale's journey and to keep the spirit of the West alive. Over the years, he collected keepsakes from his career, carefully preserving a life well lived. That vision came to life in 1967 with the opening of the Roy Rogers Dale Evans Museum in Apple Valley, California. It quickly became a haven of cowboy memorabilia, drawing fans eager to see iconic items like the preserved forms of Trigger, Roy's faithful horse, and Bullet, his beloved dog. After Roy and Dale passed away, the museum was relocated in 2003 to Branson, Missouri, a city that mirrored their deep ties to country music. However, by 2009, economic struggles forced the museum to close its doors. Still, the spirit of the collection endured. In 2010, an auction of the museum's contents brought in a staggering $2.9 million. Trigger and Bullet were purchased by a Nebraska-based TV network, ensuring their continued preservation. Not all treasures disappeared from public view. The Autry National Center acquired key pieces of memorabilia, including vintage photos, news clippings, film scripts, and Roy's unique plastic saddle. One standout auction item was Roy's 1964 Pontiac Bonneville, a car unlike any other, adorned with silver dollars, chrome pistols, horseshoes, and rifles by famed tailor Nudie Cohn. It fetched an impressive $254,500. Roy's adopted daughter with his first wife Arlene, Cheryl Rogers Barnett, later shared touching reflections about life with her iconic parents. She described her magical childhood spent around Republic Studios, surrounded by costumers and makeup artists, where the studio felt more like family than a workplace. She recalled meeting her stepmother, Dale Evans, an actress who broke the mold of traditional female roles in westerns. Dale was fierce, vibrant, and ahead of her time, both on-screen and off. Cheryl recounted the deeply emotional story of her sister, Robin Elizabeth, who was born with Down syndrome. Despite doctors' advice to institutionalize the child, Roy and Dale chose love over fear. Tragically, Robin passed away at just 2 years old from MPS. Dale's grief became purpose. She wrote the book Angel Unaware, a heartfelt tribute that touched readers around the globe and raised awareness for children with special needs. Through their platform, Roy and Dale became powerful advocates for the disabled, championing acceptance and education at a time when few dared to speak up. Their efforts opened doors for countless families and forever changed public attitudes. As Cheryl noted, her parents' greatest legacy wasn't in the films they made or the songs they sang, but in the compassion they shared, the lives they uplifted, and the family they lovingly built. And though Cheryl joked that she may not have wanted to join her dad on a week-long cattle drive, she's been learning every campfire song he ever sang. Their memory lives on in every lyric, every saddle-worn photo, and every heart they touched. Was this a nostalgic ride down memory lane for you? Share your thoughts in the comments. Give this video a like if you enjoyed it, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications for more timeless stories like this.